Welcome to Crime Desk Wednesday, Season 1, Episode 5. Today, we're getting stuck into an issue that, well, for so many people in South Africa, it's more than just a crime stat, isn't it? It feels like a constant background crisis, vehicle hijacking. Our mission today really is to look past the scary headlines, past the immediate fear. We want to understand hijacking, not as just random violence, but, as a system, a highly organized, chillingly efficient, parallel economy. We're going under the hood, so to speak, to look at the logistics, the tech, the money, what actually keeps this whole terrible cycle going. And just before we dive in, if you find this kind of analysis valuable, please do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep Crime Desk Wednesday going each week.
Yeah, and focusing on that word systematic, that's really where the key insights are, I think. When you look at the reports, from private security, from the police, they often focus on the attack itself, the moment it happened. But the real story, the bigger picture, is this huge kind of cold machinery operating behind the scenes. It treats cars basically as raw materials for profit.
So to really set the scene for you listening, let's go right into the thick of it. Middle of the night. That's when this ecosystem really thrives. Picture this. A dimly lit operations room. Somewhere in Johannesburg, it's after midnight. There's an analyst watching screens filled with tiny icons, active trackers all over the place. And then, boom, northern suburbs, a small red dot just vanishes. Signal gone.
And in that room, the reaction isn't like panic. It's drilled. It's protocol. Because they immediately know the difference or suspect the difference between just a technical fault and something deliberate, interference.
Right.
So the analyst types a quick note, possible jammer, initiate chase protocol. They read that silence, that lack of signal, as a tactical move. Someone's actively blocking it.
And within minutes, the recovery team is rolling. We're talking 2 vehicles, multiple people. They've got specialized gear, body armor. They're talking in this urgent shorthand, coordinates, grid squares, engine codes. This isn't just a random chase. It's precise. It's calculated. It really shows the level of organization needed just to respond to the threat.
And what's really telling is how some of our sources describe these teams. They're not just guards. They're called technicians of crisis, or even private soldiers in an undeclared war. That snapshot right there tells you everything. The response has to be that sophisticated, the tech, the speed, the precision, because it has to match the professionalism of the criminals themselves.
It's a logistics war, essentially.
Exactly. The crime is logistical, so the counter strategy has to be built on speed and intelligence.
Okay, let's try and get our heads around the sheer scale of this. Because we need to quantify the fear that, honestly, shapes so much of daily life in parts of South Africa. The latest stats we have from SAPS for 2024, they're just stark. Over 22,000 hijackings reported last year alone.
22,000. It's a huge number, almost hard to grasp.
Yeah.
But if you break that down into, real time, the analysis suggests a car disappears roughly every 25 minutes, somewhere in the country.
Every 25 minutes.
Yeah. Think about it. In the time it takes us to have this conversation, several vehicles will likely have been targeted. That volume, it just creates this immense pressure. It chips away not just at safety, but at people's basic sense of stability. Businesses, too.
And it's not spread evenly, is it? The risk is very concentrated.
No, definitely not. The hotspots are consistently Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Western Cape.
The economic hubs.
Exactly right. The crime follows the money. It follows the density of potential targets. And that connects back to the bigger picture. The data makes it absolutely clear. These hijackings are not random. They are, as you said, data-driven, strategic.
The criminals are making rational choices based on what works.
Absolutely. They're maximizing profit, minimizing risk, using what they know about the market.
So what is that data telling them? What are these strategic choices they're making?
Well, primarily, it boils down to 2 things. Vulnerability and liquidity. How easy is it to get the car, and how easy is it to sell? So first, vulnerability. Time of day is critical. Over 60% happen after dark. Specifically, that quiet window, say 9 p.m. to 3 a.m.
Fewer witnesses, maybe slower response times.
Exactly. Less traffic, fewer eyes on the street, maybe less police presence. It's the optimal window. Second is what you could call stock selection, liquidity. What sells fast? They go for high-demand models, ones that are easy to sell whole or, more often, dismantle for parts.
And we see the same names cropping up again and again.
Consistently. The white Toyota Hilux, the Ford Ranger, the VW Polo. Those 3 are always near the top.
Why those specifically? Is it just popularity?
It's popularity, yes, but also practicality for the criminals. They're widely used across Southern Africa, so parts are always in demand everywhere. And the Hilux and Ranger in particular, they're tough, often diesel, perfect for moving across borders, handling rougher terrain maybe.
So the hijacking itself, the initial crime, is directly linked to what the aftermarket wants.
Directly. It's pure supply chain thinking. Yeah. Right from the start. The demand dictates the strategy on the street.
It really is a business model.
It absolutely is. And the methods they use confirm that surveillance element we talked about. Most successful hits are these close-to-home attacks or the follow-home operations. That tells you they've watched the victim, they've planned it.
They know the routine.
They know the routine, they know the moment of vulnerability, it's calculated. And you can even see it in the monthly stats. You get these clear spikes around weekends, public holidays.
When people are moving around more, maybe letting their guard down a bit.
Precisely. More movement, less predictable patterns maybe, but also just more opportunities. They leverage human habits.
Okay, so let's get into the actual mechanics of it, the modus operandi, how they actually do it. We can break it down into roughly 4 stages. And stage 1, the setup, is crucial. Our sources say this is really the long game.
Yeah, that's so important to understand. The violence, the actual moment of the hijacking, that's just the final step in what's often a patient, well-resourced plan. These groups invest serious time in surveillance. Selecting the right target vehicle, yes, but also watching the driver.
So they're not just looking at the car, they're profiling the driver's habits.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where do they park? Do they always stop for coffee at the same place? What time do they usually get home? They're looking for predictability, for that moment of weakness.
How do they do that without being obvious?
They use spotters. These are lookouts, basically. They might be in a parked car down the street, sitting in a shopping center food court, watching from a high point, sometimes just on foot near a complex gate.
And they feed information back to the main team.
Yeah, usually discreetly. Quick voice notes, maybe even hand signals, things that don't leave an easy digital trail. Target leaving now, white sedan, 1 person inside, that kind of thing.
The data also points to specific vulnerabilities in the commercial sector, right? Delivery vehicles and such.
Oh, definitely. Fleet vehicles, delivery vans. They're often seen as easier targets.
Because the routes are predictable.
Predictable routes, scheduled stops, often valuable cargo inside. That predictability is gold for hijackers. It's led to this big surge we're seeing in last-mile hijackings, targeting those smaller delivery trucks just before they reach your house.
Which then forces companies to spend more on security.
Which drives up costs for everyone. It's another ripple effect.
Okay, so the target's picked, the routine is known. Then comes stage 2. The strike. This sounds like it's often highly choreographed, roles assigned.
Very much so. You'll often have distinct roles. A driver for the getaway car, someone to intimidate the victim, maybe another acting as lookout during the strike itself. And the tactics. They're designed for maximum impact, minimum resistance. The most dangerous, statistically, are those follow-home operations. They hit you right at your gate, maybe as you're waiting for it to open.
That moment you feel you're almost safe.
Exactly. You're distracted, maybe fumbling with keys or the remote. It's a point of perceived safety that they just brutally exploit.
And they use confusion too, don't they?
Absolutely. Confusion is a key weapon. A common tactic is the staged accident or ruse. Like a minor fender bender, someone signaling you have a flat tire, or even pretending their own car is broken down to get you to stop.
So you get out to check the damage or help.
And your focus is off the real threat. Your guard is down because you're thinking about the accident, not the hijacking about to happen. Even simpler stuff works, the basic roadblock tactic. Using another car, or sometimes even a group of people suddenly crossing the road, to force you to stop unexpectedly, usually in a quiet spot.
But the really worrying development in the strike phase is the technology they're using now, signal jamming.
Yeah, this is a major escalation. It's sophisticated and makes things much more dangerous. They use these portable devices, jammers, to basically block or interfere with the signals from your car key, your immobilizer, or, crucially, your tracking device.
What's the goal there? Just stop the tracker.
It's twofold, really. First, it can create vulnerability before the strike, maybe stopping your remote locking from working as you walk away from the car, or causing the engine to cut out shortly after you drive off if it interferes with certain immobilizers. Second, and this is key, it blinds the tracking companies during the immediate escape. It gives the hijackers a quiet window, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 30, where the vehicle is electronically invisible. Time to get away clean.
Okay, so the strike is successful. They have the vehicle. Then we're into stages 3 and 4. Escape and cleanup. This is where the real logistics kick in, right?
This is where that parallel economy really shows its efficiency. First step, move the stolen vehicle immediately to what's called a cooling zone.
What's that exactly?
It's usually a temporary secure spot. Could be a rented garage, an empty unit in an industrial park late at night, sometimes just an abandoned building. The car sits there for a short while, hours, maybe a day or two, long enough to make sure it hasn't got a hidden tracker they missed, and to give the next guys in the chain, the handlers, time to sort out what happens next. Disassembly, false papers, long-distance transport.
And getting it there relies on knowing the routes.
Or absolutely. The organized groups have prearranged drop-off points and they use established logistics corridors. The sources keep mentioning the Maputo corridor heading east to Mozambique and the Beitbridge corridor going north toward Zimbabwe.
Why those routes? Just because they lead out of the country?
That's part of it, but it's also about efficiency and cover. These are busy commercial routes, lots of truck traffic, which helps hide a stolen vehicle. And crucially, the networks have established trusted people along these routes for handoffs, and they know where the poorest points are places to cross borders with less scrutiny, maybe with better help.
Okay, so the car's cooled, maybe moved along a corridor. Then comes the final stage, the aftermarket endgames, the cleanup. How do they actually make money?
Well, the quickest and probably most common way is parting out.
Stripping it for spares?
Exactly. The vehicle gets taken to a chop shop and is rapidly dismantled. They take the high-value bits, engine, gearbox, airbags, electronics, and especially catalytic converters right now because of the precious metals.
And that speed also destroys evidence, right?
Precisely. Once those parts are sold off to various workshops or maybe even shipped out, tracing them back to the original stolen car is incredibly difficult, almost impossible.
But some cars aren't stripped. They get a second life.
That's the more sophisticated end of the operation.
Oh, yeah.
Re-registration. These vehicles are essentially laundered, given a whole new identity. It involves getting forged documents, physically swapping the vehicle identification number plates, maybe getting new, seemingly legitimate registration papers.
That sounds like it needs inside help.
It almost always does. You need complicit officials somewhere in the system licensing departments, maybe police, to make it look legitimate. These cleaned cars can then re-enter the legal market, sold to unsuspecting buyers locally, or often shipped across borders. And the third main route is simply the cross-border sale of the intact vehicle. Drive it straight to a neighboring country where demand is high for that specific model and where tracing is harder. Quick sale, quick profit.
It's clear this whole system relies on a whole network of people, not just the hijackers themselves, a kind of support cast.
Absolutely. This isn't just a couple of guys with guns. To make this supply chain work at scale, you need layers of support. You need corrupt officials, as we said. You need mechanics with the tools and know-how to strip cars quickly and discreetly. You need scrapyard owners willing to buy parts with no questions asked. You need financial middlemen to handle the cash.
The low recovery rates for stolen vehicles really speak to how efficient this whole post-theft industry is.
It's the clearest sign. They're incredibly good at making cars disappear after the initial theft.
Okay, we've touched on signal jamming being crucial during the strike. Let's spend a bit more time on that in segment 3, the technology war. Because this is a constant battle, isn't it? Millions being spent on both sides.
It really is a fascinating high-stakes tech race. And understanding the jammer itself is key. Basically, a signal jammer is just a radio device, but it's designed to shout really loudly on the same frequencies that other devices use to listen. So it blasts out noise on the GPS frequencies used for satellite positioning, the GSM frequencies for mobile phone communication, and sometimes specific radio frequencies, RF, used by car key fobs.
So the tracker unit in the car might still be working perfectly fine, but it just can't hear the signals it needs. The jammer's noise drowns them out.
That's a perfect way to put it. The jammer injects so much noise power into the immediate area that the relatively weak signal from a distant satellite or a cell tower just gets lost. It becomes inaudible to the tracker.
Creating that silent window you mentioned.
Exactly. Turning a potentially high-risk theft, where the car could be tracked in minutes, into a much lower risk extraction, at least for that initial getaway period.
And the criminals' tech isn't standing still either, is it? It's evolving.
Constantly. They use different tools for different jobs. You've got small, handheld remote jammers, often used just to block the signal from your key fob as you walk away from the car in a parking lot. Makes it easy to open the door later.
Opportunistic.
Yeah. Then you have more powerful GPS jammers, designed specifically to block those satellite signals over a slightly wider area. And increasingly, we're seeing these internal jammers devices that plug into the OBD port under the dashboard or even into the cigarette lighter socket.
What do those do?
They can interfere more directly with the car's internal electronics or sometimes disable specific types of trackers that draw power or data from the car's systems.
It really is an arms race.
Yeah.
So how are the tracking companies fighting back? How do you counter an invisible attack like jamming?
Well, the responses had to get much smarter than just simple tracking. It's about analyzing patterns and anticipating the attack. The first line of defense is the signal loss alarm. Control rooms are programmed now to see a sudden, localized loss of both GSM and GPS signal, not just as a dead spot, but as a potential indicator of jamming.
Especially in known hotspots.
Exactly. If a car just vanishes off the map in an area known for hijackings, it immediately flags a possible jamming alert. It triggers a high-priority response. They're essentially programming the system to be suspicious of silence.
But how do they know for sure it's a jammer? Couldn't the car just have driven into a basement parking lot or a long tunnel?
That's where more sophisticated techniques come in, like RF scanning. Some advanced control centers and even some high-end tracking units can actually detect the presence of abnormal radio frequency energy on those GPS and GSM bands.
They can hear the jammer's noise.
They can detect its signature, yes. They look for specific energy spikes that match the profiles of known jamming devices. It needs clever filtering to sort it out from all the other background radio noise in a city, but it can confirm hostile intent.
Okay, but what if the jammer works? What if the signal is completely gone? How does the recovery team even know where to start looking?
That's where fallback channels and inertial sensors become critical. If the main GPS and GSM signals are blocked, the better trackers will try to switch to something else. Maybe an alternative radio frequency like short-range RF, or sometimes even satellite comms if it's a very high-end unit. But crucially, many now include inertial sensors. Think tiny accelerometers and gyroscopes, like in your smartphone.
What do they measure?
They measure movement, acceleration, braking, turning. Even without a GPS lock, the unit can record the vehicle's last known speed and direction, and then track the G-forces and changes in direction.
So it can estimate where the car is going, even when blind.
It can infer the likely direction of travel, yes. The control room can use that data to start a blind pursuit, guiding the recovery team towards the estimated location until, hopefully, the vehicle moves out of the jammer's range or the jammer is switched off and the signal comes back online.
That's incredibly clever. They're planning for the silence, not just reacting after it happens.
And the final layer is integrating all this intelligence into pattern recognition. The systems learn. If they see repeated signal loss incidents happening near the same mall exit or a particular highway off-ramp, places known for hijackings.
It triggers an even faster, higher priority response.
Exactly. Because it matches known criminal tactics, possibly linked to a specific crew operating in that area. The tech battle is increasingly about prediction and proactive defense, not just recovery after the fact. So understanding that tech battle helps us appreciate the scale of the whole ecosystem of crime. Its success, its resilience really comes down to how it's structured. It's not just one gang, it's highly segmented and professionalized almost.
Yeah, the source material paints a picture of real specialization, which, as you say, makes the whole network harder to break down. Can you walk us through those different roles?
Sure. You can think of it in maybe three main tiers. At the ground level, you have the operators, these are the spotters doing the surveillance we talked about, and the drivers or crew who actually carry out the strike. They take the highest physical risk, often for the lowest share of the profit.
Okay, then who's above them?
The next level up are the handlers. These are more like the logistics and admin guys. They're responsible for moving the stolen cars from the drop-off point to the cooling zones. They manage the waiting periods. They might be the fixers who arrange the forged documents or coordinate the stripping crews or set up the long-haul transport.
They connect the street-level theft to the next stage.
Exactly. And then, at the top, you have the organizers. These are the entrepreneurs, if you like, of the whole operation. They manage the money, the risk. They're the ones cultivating the necessary corrupt relationships with officials. They arrange the big cross-border movements. And, crucially, they manage the demand side, making sure there's always a buyer lined up for the stolen vehicles or parts.
It really does sound like a business. Procurement, processing, distribution.
It functions exactly like a disturbingly efficient small to medium enterprise.
And that structure, that division of labor, that's why just arresting the guys who did the hijacking often doesn't stop things.
Precisely. The network is built for resilience. If an operator gets caught, it's treated as a cost of doing business. They find a replacement. The handlers might shift routes or use different chop shops. To really hurt the network, you have to target those handlers, and especially the organizers, the ones managing the money and the connections. That's much harder to do.
Let's talk about the physical side of the logistics, the soft infrastructure. We know the cars move fast, but where do they actually go? What makes a good safe node or corridor?
Well, after an urban theft, the first priority is concealment and access. So they funnel quickly towards places that offer both. Think industrial parks on the edges of cities, quiet at night, lots of units to hide a car. Abandoned warehouses are classic. Even just areas with known poor street lighting or non-working CCTV cameras. From these nodes, they need to get onto the major arteries quickly, the main highways, the freight routes, places where a single vehicle can blend into high volumes of traffic.
And those corridors you mentioned, Makuto and Bite Bridge.
They're more than just roads. They represent established chains of handoffs. The risk gets passed along. From the hijack crew to maybe a dedicated long-haul driver, then crucially to local handlers near the border. These border handlers specialize in the final step, maybe negotiating with a complicit customs official, or knowing the unmonitored farm tracks or river crossings to bypass official checkpoints altogether.
And you've mentioned it a few times, but it seems like none of this large-scale movement, the re-registration, none of it works without those poorest points in the legitimate system.
Yeah.
The corruption.
Corruption is the absolute grease in the wheels of this illicit market. It's essential for scaling up. And it's not always, a massive bribe to a top official. Often it's a network of smaller, ongoing arrangements. Maybe a clerk at the vehicle licensing office who'll process dodgy paperwork for a fee. An informant inside the police feeding route information or warning about roadblocks. A customs guy at the border who agrees to wave through certain trucks without full inspection.
It's the soft infrastructure of complicity.
Exactly. Without it, the whole process of moving and legitimizing stolen vehicles would grind to a halt pretty quickly.
Okay, so we have the supply chain. But who's creating the demand? Who are the demand drivers actually buying all these stolen cars and parts?
The market is incredibly diverse, which is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Domestically, you've got demand from individuals looking for cheap replacement parts, maybe someone whose own car was legitimately damaged. You've got less scrupulous repair shops happy to use stolen components to cut costs.
The gray market.
The gray market, exactly. Then internationally, especially for those high-demand models like the Hilux or Ranger, you often have organized buyers, people who specifically source stolen vehicles in volume from South Africa because they're highly prized in neighboring countries. Maybe they're harder to get new there or much more expensive.
So the demand dictates the price, which dictates the incentive to steal specific models.
Absolutely. It's pure market economics. If, for example, the global price of platinum and palladium spikes, suddenly the catalytic converters become incredibly valuable.
Which makes stealing older cars just to cut out the converter more attractive.
Precisely. The risk-reward calculation changes based on the demand for specific components. It's a constantly shifting landscape driven by market forces. Okay, so we've mapped out this huge, complex criminal economy. Now we have to look critically at the response. Segment 5. State efforts versus the constraints they face.
And we should acknowledge the South African Police Service does have dedicated units, like the Vehicle Crime Investigation Units, VCIUs. They are specifically tasked with tackling this, and they're under enormous pressure.
They absolutely are, and they do vital work. Often they rely heavily on intelligence that's actually shared by the private tracking companies, which is interesting in itself. But the constraints they operate under are just immense, especially when you remember that figure, over 22,000 incidents a year.
The sheer volume must be overwhelming.
It is. Investigators are stretched incredibly thin. Unless a hijacking is linked to a major syndicate investigation or involves extreme violence, the reality is that individual cases often get limited resources and attention. There just isn't the capacity. We're talking huge caseloads, often coupled with staff shortages and sometimes equipment challenges.
And the nature of the crime itself, cars moving quickly across jurisdictions, must create huge hurdles.
Massive hurdles. A car stolen in Johannesburg can genuinely be over the border in Mozambique or Zimbabwe in, say, 8 to 12 hours, sometimes less. Official law enforcement is constrained by provincial boundaries, then national borders. Sharing information, getting warrants, coordinating cross-border operations. It all takes time the criminals use very effectively.
There was that quote from a former VCIU officer you mentioned.
Yeah, it really stuck with me. He said something like, "The theft itself isn't the main crime anymore, it's what happens afterward." By the time the police machinery can fully mobilize, the car might already be stripped, re-registered, or across a border. The trail goes cold incredibly fast or enters a whole new legal jurisdiction.
And stepping into this gap, you have this massive, thriving private security industry. Companies like Tracker, CarTrack, they're almost acting like parallel responders, aren't they? Quasi-state actors.
That's a good way to describe it. They form this crucial second layer of security. They're generally faster, more agile, certainly less bound by the bureaucracy that can slow down state responses. They invest hugely in the anti-jamming stuff we talked about, but also in rapid response teams, helicopters, predictive analysis.
And their recovery rates are often much higher than the official ones.
Significantly higher, yes. They provide a vital service, especially for insured vehicles. But they're essentially filling a vacuum that the state, due to resource limitations, currently can't fully occupy.
But this reliance on the private sector, it throws up a really difficult question about fairness and access, doesn't it? This two-tier system of safety.
This is a fundamental issue, really, a question of economic justice. Because all that advanced tracking technology, the rapid response teams, the high chance of recovery, it's overwhelmingly available only to those who can afford the insurance premiums that include it and the monthly subscription fees for the tracking service.
So if you can't afford it,
If you can't afford it, you're largely reliant on the state system, which we've just established is massively overstretched. It creates this stark divide. The wealthier, the insured, they benefit from a highly effective private security net. But the majority of vehicle owners, the less affluent, they're left far more vulnerable. Any real long-term solution has to think about how to bridge that gap. It can't just be safety for those who can pay.
you know, the true cost of this hijacking epidemic isn't just measured in stolen cars or insurance payouts. It's the psychological toll, the way it creates what some call the fear economy.
Absolutely. Hijacking isn't just a property crime. It's a violation. It injects fear directly into everyday life. It steals your sense of certainty, forces you into this state of kind of constant low-level vigilance. And that anxiety, that need for precaution, it becomes a tangible force. It actually starts to shape behavior and even the economy in measurable ways. That's the fear economy.
How does that actually manifest? What are these behavioral adaptations people make?
Well, you see drivers actively changing their routes, taking longer, maybe less convenient ways home, just to avoid known hotspots or roads they perceive as unsafe, especially after dark. That adds time, adds fuel costs, people reschedule their lives, maybe avoiding going out in the evening or planning trips to finish before sunset, purely based on safety concerns, not convenience.
It restricts your freedom, essentially.
It absolutely does. The sources mention how this collective anxiety impacts social life, local businesses that rely on evening trade, community interaction. It shrinks the public sphere.
And you can literally see the fear reflected in the way our cities are built, can't you? The urban landscape changes.
Dramatically, look at the proliferation of high-security gated communities, especially in the major urban centers. People retreating into these fortified enclaves seeking safety. And then just look around you in many suburbs. The high walls, the electric fences, the elaborate security gates, the boom gates controlling access to whole streets, the concrete bollards outside shops. It's what you could call security-driven architecture.
It's a constant visual reminder of the threat.
It is. It's like a physical tax society pays for insecurity. It signals constantly that public space is potentially dangerous and that safety is something you have to buy and maintain privately.
Let's bring this down to the individual level. We had that case study, Sifo, an accountant from Johannesburg. He was hijacked in his own driveway.
Yeah, Sifo's story is sadly very typical. The attack itself was terrifying, obviously. But what's striking is the aftermath. Even though his car was actually recovered later by a tracking company, he talked about the lasting impact. This chronic hypervigilance, every car behind him feels like a potential threat now, an erosion of trust, even in the safety of his own home.
It stays with you.
It absolutely does. He reported ongoing stress, anxiety, that feeling that insecurity has just become a normalized part of life. It's almost like a societal PTSD.
And the economic ripple effects go way beyond just Sifo's experience.
Oh, massively. Think about it. Insurance premiums skyrocket in high-risk areas, making car ownership more expensive for everyone there. Security upgrades for homes and cars, tracker subscriptions, these become almost non-negotiable monthly costs for many, taking money away from other things. And for businesses, especially logistics and delivery companies, they face disrupted schedules, they have to plan longer routes to avoid danger zones, they invest heavily in vehicle security and driver safety. All those costs eventually get passed down to us, the consumers. This fear economy acts as a huge, often uncounted drag on overall economic activity and efficiency.
So if we pull all these threads together, the main takeaway seems to be this. Hijacking isn't just crime, it's a market. A big, adaptable, profitable market. And that means the solutions have to be market-focused too. They need to be structural, systemic, not just about catching individual hijackers. Which brings us to segment 7, breaking the cycle.
Exactly. Trying to solve this just by reacting to individual thefts, is like playing whack-a-mole against a hydra. You need to go deeper. Experts are increasingly calling for a shift towards intelligence-led policing, using all that data, the hotspots, the times, the vehicle types, the known routes, not just for recovery, but proactively.
How would that work?
It means analyzing patterns to predict where and when crimes are likely to happen, and deploying resources strategically before they occur. It means targeted, intelligence-based raids on the infrastructure or the chop shops, the suspected cooling zones, disrupting those known cross-border smuggling routes. Hit the supply chain, not just the initial theft.
And crucially, attacking the money. Market disruption.
That has to be the core focus. If you make it less profitable, you reduce the incentive. That requires much stronger cross-border cooperation. Real-time intelligence sharing between police forces across the SADC region, joint operations to intercept vehicles and dismantle the networks that operate across borders, that's vital. And domestically, there's a massive need for stricter parts market regulation.
Making it harder to sell the stolen components.
Exactly. We need rigorous monitoring, maybe stricter licensing for scrap yards, secondhand parts dealers, even repair shops. Make it much harder and much riskier to buy or sell parts without clear proof of origin. If you choke off that quick cash from stripping cars, you remove a primary driver of the crime itself.
On the other side of the coin, technology still has a role, but maybe needs policy support.
Definitely. Policy can drive technological advancement and, importantly, standardization. We need wider adoption of tracking systems that are genuinely robust against jamming multi-channel systems, maybe more use of those inertial sensors, and pushing for better vehicle hardening right from the factory. Things like biometric immobilizers, more encrypted systems that are harder to bypass.
Making the cars themselves harder targets.
Yes. The law and manufacturing standards need to keep pace with the criminal's innovation.
And we can't ignore the human element either. The source material touched on the underlying social factors. These networks need people to operate them.
That's the uncomfortable truth. The entire system relies on a supply of individuals, often young men from marginalized communities, willing to take the risks involved in spotting, hijacking, or driving. So any truly holistic strategy has to include socioeconomic interventions. High unemployment, lack of opportunity, these create fertile recruiting grounds for criminal networks that offer quick, if dangerous, money.
So things like job creation, skills training.
Youth employment programs, vocational training, educational opportunities, initiatives that offer credible, safer alternatives to crime. It's about reducing the supply of potential recruits by offering better pathways, breaking that cycle of dependence on illicit income.
It paints a picture of a really complex challenge. The ultimate question, I suppose, is whether South Africa can actually align all these different elements, policing, policy, technology, community development, cross-border cooperation effectively enough to actually get ahead of these incredibly adaptive criminal networks.
Or will this just remain a persistent shadow? It requires seeing it as the interconnected system it is and tackling it with strategies that are just as complex and adaptive. And maybe the final thought to leave you with, wrapping up this whole deep dive, is how understanding the ecosystem changes the fundamental question. We have to stop asking just, how do we stop this hijacking? That's too narrow. The real strategic question is, how do we break the chain of profitability that makes these hijackings worthwhile in the first place? Finding the answer to that question, how to break that chain, that's what will ultimately shape the future of safety and mobility and basic trust in society.
That's a really powerful way to frame it, and a challenge that clearly needs sustained focus. Thank you for joining us for this really important deep dive on Crime Desk Wednesday. For more analysis, if you want to see the sources we drew on and dig deeper into this parallel economy, do check out our blog, and of course explore the rest of our YouTube channel for more content like this. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.